Okay, let's get started. So sorry, starting slightly later today. It's a little chaotic on my end. All dog mom related things, so we don't need to get into it. But yeah, today's gonna be fun. So we're gonna be talking about the gaming industry as a whole. It's an enormous industry, as I'm sure all of us here know. So I pulled some really interesting stats that we can kind of discuss. And then, of course, we've got Luke with us today. And we have George as well, who is our narrative designer. So I'm just going to throw out there some huge statistics. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Okay. So it's predicted that there will be 3 billion active gamers by 2023. That is 38% of the world's population. That to me is insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. Hello, everyone, by the way.
Yeah, I think this image of a gamer is really wrong in a lot of people's minds. There's this whole casual game industry that people gloss over when they talk about who gamers are. For example, like Candy Crush is one of the most played games in the world. I think 80% of its user base is women.
Hell yeah.
So actually, women make up a ton of what you consider gamers. And it's like when you say the word gamer, that's definitely not what comes to mind. The demographics are kind of skewed, but they're a huge source of spend. They're a huge source of people who actually are interested in games, and it's a huge part of the world. It's not just like the stereotype that you might have when you think about gamer.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you talked about that because I've got all of those numbers that you're just talking about. So let me look here. 3 in 5 gamers are male identifying, which means 41% are female identifying, roughly, which is pretty insane because, like you said, most people have this like preconception of what the gamer looks like, and it's usually wrong. And then talking about Candy Crush, so free to play games generate over 70 billion of the market revenue per year. And casual single player games are the most played type of video game worldwide. And that includes games like Candy Crush, Clash of the Clans, like all of those kinds of things. It's really crazy once you dive into these numbers. And I also read another stat that said the video game sector is larger than the movie and music industries combined.
It's one of the biggest industries. Heidi, like, do you have perhaps a statistic that says if the percentage of female players is an increasing one? Because I have a feeling that that will be so. And I completely agree with both of you. It's, in the past, when you used the word gamer, and when you talked about games, it more sounded like a bit of an elitist thing, like a special thing that a group of friends would do, or a specific type of person would do. But now, over the years, that has been proven, so wrong because I feel like there's so much diversity in genre, in the type of games, the type of gamers, and there's a little bit of everything, like for everyone in the industry right now. So that's why the industry is completely booming. It's probably, I don't know, like how far it can go. I have no idea, but it is just a massive, massive industry right now. And we are seeing that, respect being put on its name over the years. So, I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to that video game sector being larger than movie and music industries combined, and yet I would say the average person wouldn't know that fact, because it just doesn't receive the same amount of media attention or um, clout, respect, like all of the above, which is interesting. And then going back to the female, I did read that it is increasing. I don't have a hard number for you, but one thing I did find interesting here, and I'm sorry for constantly talking about male, female. Obviously, there are more than 2 genders, but when it comes down to statistics, often they're very uh, bi, but bipolar, by whatever that word is. So I apologize for that. But males are more likely to purchase video games and in-game content than females. A 2018 questionnaire found that males were more likely to make in-game purchases in 4 of 6 categories. Female gamers were more likely to buy power-ups and time savers, which was kind of just like, I wonder why.
Yeah,
I
I wonder
wonder
what
what
the
that gets
correlation.
to.
I
Yeah.
feel like that might be the correlation between what type of games those types are typically attracted to playing. Where
Yeah.
you'll see like that demographic is typically playing in the casual game industry, where that is kind of the power ups that you would buy in a game like Candy Crush, in a game like Bejeweled, Cookie Mama, all of that too. And not to bring this back to Web3 or make this about Web3, but also like take a note, the gaming industry is this huge industry. There's a ton of different diverse profiles that are playing these games, but then in the Web3 gaming industry, like what are the types of games that we're seeing get built right now, and what are they catering to? The reason why we're so bullish on what we're building is because we think there's this huge untapped market of these gamers who are dying to get into the Web3 space, dying to get into the Web3 gaming space, and it's just kind of getting overlooked in the same way that that demographic typically gets overlooked in the crypto space as well.
Yeah, so a couple other little things here that I thought were super interesting that I read. So China and US dominate the market, which I think most of us would expect, but by the amount that China dominates is insane. So there are just under 700 million active gamers in China. And then the next one is the United States, which sits around 190 million. So about a third of the amount. And then it goes down to like 75 for Japan, South Korea, Germany. Like it keeps going down. And Canada's on there, kind of cute, 21 million. But which is actually pretty high, seeing as our population's only like 30 something. But
only
wild.
21 million. Just 21 million.
When you compare it to China, so China is 685 million active gamers in 2022.
That is a lot of people. That is a lot of people who play games.
What else are you supposed to do during a Canadian winter other than play games?
I don't know. Apparently, people like to go skiing or something.
You're living in Ontario. You have very few options. I think that's why there's a huge gaming industry in Quebec and Ottawa, maybe.
Well, no. Okay, so Canada's ranked 8th in the world, which is pretty high when you consider how many countries there are, but it just doesn't even compare to China's numbers, and of course the United States. Luke, do you know the population of the United States?
300 something million, 350, I think.
Okay, so about 2/3 of the population are active gamers.
When you put that into perspective, it's actually very impressive. So probably that means like 70% of all of your neighbors are playing video games, some sort of video game, regardless of age, which is, it's just a funny thing to think about, like how it has evolved in recent years, and so much that, in the past it could have been like this very niche thing that some people would do, and now everyone's kind of just dragged into it, and there's no way out. It's so fun.
There's no way out.
It's interesting, the stigma that used to be around like being labeled as a gamer and how that's changing now too. Especially as like casual games get more and more popular. But yeah, getting labeled as a gamer at one point used to be kind of like socially a stigma, and now it's just like everybody plays games in some kind of form, whether it's a sports game, whether it's an MMO, whether it's Candy Crush.
Oh yeah, I still play a lot of games. Let me ask you guys, when did you guys discovered gaming and that it was fun? Like, what do you remember that moment? Like, what was that moment like, Heidi?
Okay, so it's really interesting that you asked that, because I, first of all, am female identifying, and I am very feminine in general. I love beauty, fashion, makeup, all of the like stereotypical women things. So gaming is not one of those. And I have never considered myself a gamer. To this day, I don't consider myself a gamer, which is because of how we've defined gamer, which is wrong. It's not correct. I am a gamer. I'm so freaking addicted to like Candy Crush, and there's this other game I've been playing right now. It's called Hole.io, and you literally just drag your finger around a map and try and swallow up cities, and it's addicting. And growing up, I played, Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego, and I had this like basketball game that taught me how to type, and I played Roller Coaster Tycoon, and I played Sims, and I did all of these games, but because I wasn't playing, COD and those kinds of ones, I'm not a gamer. Right?
No, it's funny though, because like by definition, Kaidi, you're not just a gamer. I don't know if you realize this. You're kind of a hardcore gamer when it comes to casual games. Like if we were to label you and like categorize you when like if you're developing Candy Crush and you're to put a label on like what kind of user you were in Candy Crush, you are literally definition of a hardcore user of that game.
Oh yeah, I'm probably in the top like 0.001%.
Yeah, Heidi, just say you're a hardcore gamer.
I'm a hardcore gamer, guys.
That was a list of games you gave us, Yeah. What was the like 5, 6?
I don't know.
Luke, what about you? Do you remember?
There's a stigma around it for some reason.
Exactly.
Like there's some social stigma where people don't want to like say that they're a gamer, or maybe they don't even really know like what a gamer means. And it's the same thing with Web3 too, where there's a stigma of like, I don't know, some people don't want to say they own NFTs to a certain type of people. Some people don't want to say that they're in Web3. But like these things are both getting more and more normal. They're getting very accepted, and they're only going to grow. The gaming industry obviously is growing. The Web3 industry is growing too. So kind of destigmatizing or getting rid of those labels, not making them feel weird or dirty or anything like that. That's a challenge.
So, Luke, when did you self-identify as a gamer?
Um, it's funny. I grew up as a gamer. Like I started playing RuneScape really young. I think a lot of people in my generation, like age band, played RuneScape way earlier than they should have. Got addicted way earlier than they should have. And whoever is with me on that, it actually taught you some pretty crazy life lessons like market manipulation, economics, how to type really fast. My Guam, my good words a minute is so high because I was just sitting in World 2 selling lobsters for an hour a day each day growing up. You had to manually type that out.
That's so funny. And you know what? That actually speaks to another part of the industry in that gaming is a way to learn different skills. And like a lot of people think of gamers as learning the obvious hard skills, the typing really fast or learning different coding languages so that they can build some sort of addition or hack a game or do all of those things. But people often miss the social. There's a lot of young, and my gut thing is to say young men, but into it's children, it's girls, it's boys, it's whoever sitting like alone but being a part of these massive online communities and building these social skills, building this emotional intelligence, but just not in person. It's really, really interesting, and I think it's only starting to take hold on like that industry that talks to those things.
Yeah, so the interesting thing with that, you're right. Like a lot of our social circles in gaming right now, they're a bit gendered, at least like us growing up, and playing that, like, a lot of friends played COD together. A lot of friends played Halo. I don't know, when I was playing those games, we didn't, maybe it was just because we didn't talk to girls back then, but we didn't have like really any like cross-gender communities in terms of that kind of stuff. And there were, if like any women were playing games, they were probably pretty different games. But this generation, the generation growing up, the one like before Zoomers or like the ones that are younger than Zoomers even, it's crazy. Their entire social circles actually revolve around Minecraft and Roblox. So we're gonna see like this whole generation where all their social action is actually through games, and their primary way of hanging out isn't through like real life hanging out, but it's actually through these. I don't want to call them metaverses, but it's through games, Roblox and Minecraft. It's crazy how much they've taken hold of like the younger generations coming up. So it's gonna be a really interesting switch in demographics and usage over the next like it'll probably be like a 10-year switch when that's like really, really in effect when these kids who are like 11 to like 15 right now are young adults out in the world and spending their time.
Yeah. And you know what? It on top of that is another layer, and that is, like we have a Discord community. I spend all day in the Discord. I feel like I'm close friends with so many of our users, and to be honest, half of them I don't even know who they actually are. And that speaks to this space as well. This is a little bit of a off topic thing, but I found it quite funny. I had someone reach out to me on Twitter a couple months ago and say, hey, I'm in Web3, I'm in Vancouver too, we should meet up. And I was like, sure, see you at this time. I didn't even know if they were a woman, if they were a man, how old they were. And I think that's common in the gaming industry too, is this like layer of anonymity. And I'm not sure if it's good or if it's bad. I think it has pros and cons to it, but it definitely adds another layer to that social structure.
It's escapism.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed hearing Heidi, yours and Luke's experiences with your first games. Mine was a little bit different. For example, I got into games at a very young age, and mostly, for the most part, for me, it was about escapism and competition. So I'm very much a competitive person, and I used to play tons of games on a competitive, like on quite a high competitive level, like StarCraft. I used to play Warcraft 3, World of Warcraft. I used to play Counter-Strike a little bit too after, and a whole bunch of games. And then I used to play, how I got into narrative was through poetry and RPGs, like narrative RPG games, old school Dungeons and Dragons based ARPGs, like Planescape Torment is one of my favorite games. Kingdom Under Fire series are one of my favorite series. What else do we have there? Shenmue series are really well written by Yu Suzuki. And it's just weird how, our gaming experiences or our gaming roots are a little bit different. But now we've kind of come to this point where everyone can join in on the fun. And I think like that is one of the most pleasurable funs about seeing this industry grow into something positive rather, than regressing into being something more of a niche. And there was a period where that was kind of a risk. And I'm very glad that aura of elitism kind of has dissipated. And now we have, all kinds of people from very different backgrounds just joining in. And, I think what makes a hardcore gamer or gamer at all is just how much time, enjoyment, and philosophical and emotional pleasure you can get out of your gaming experience. And that you're a gamer, even if you're 75 and sitting in your backyard just playing an RPG 5 or 6 hours a day, to me, you're a hardcore gamer because you're putting in so much and you're taking out the all of the pleasure and kind of the philosophy out of games. And you have that in games nowadays too. You can afford to put so much time into it because the payoff is there. There's so much to be gained on a social level, on a mental level, on an emotional level, on a therapeutic level from gaming that, it's a very exciting time to be involved in gaming as a whole.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to hit you guys with some more stats. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
So, video games are usually considered an activity for kids and teenagers, right? I think a lot of people think of like a younger generation when we're talking about a gamer. So these are stats from the US. 79% of gamers in the US are adults over the age of 18. 79%. Okay.
That's a surprising one, I'll admit.
It is. Of that population, 38% are 18 to 34, and 6% are over the age of 65, which means that gap between like 35 and 64, there are so many gamers.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Yeah, I guess people don't realize that most gamers are actually, they're not kids, they're not teenagers, they're not young adults. They're actually people with families, with kids, things like that. It's like a good one. It's like you can spend time with your kids, but also too, it's just like a good escape from like the stress and realities of like what it's like to partake in life out there. And yeah, it's interesting too because I think that demographic is going to continue to age, where I don't see why these gamers who are playing in their 30s, 40s right now would ever stop in later in life, where basically these demographics are going to kind of even out. And we're going to have like more of an even distribution across the age groups where it's going to be like, 80-year-olds are obviously playing games. What else can they do? They can't move around, but they can have a sick time in VR. They can have a sick time in AR, where, building games for like all types of people, that's important in the future.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I was going to say is I agree with you. It's going to be an aging population and, 80-year-olds are going to be playing video games, but the type of video game that an 80-year-old is playing versus an 18-year-old, I feel like is always going to be different. It's like the type of music you listen to. It's like what you grow up with. I feel like it's always going to be a little bit different, which is exactly what you just ended with, in that we need to make sure that we're developing for all age groups.
That is difficult too. That is definitely a challenge, like when I work on narrative for Pixels for our game, for example, sometimes I have a hard time envisioning the average player, like who am I building this for? Because there's such variety right now. But you know what? I think you're right, Heidi. I can't wait to play my first game when I'm 80. I can't wait. Like, imagine myself still playing games when I'm very, very old, and I hope that kind of comes true.
Yeah. I hope so too.
Yeah, what's that Black Mirror episode too? I think it's like San Junipero, where like a lot of people at end of life, they go into like a metaverse kind of thing, and they kind of get like a second chance at life that way.
That's so I haven't seen that episode. That's cool though.
That sounds extreme, but yeah, I would love it. Why not? Why not? That's the question.
Okay, and then it is an estimated that 64% of US adults play video games regularly. So I broke this down, okay? The US population, actually I have it here, it's just under 330 million. The US adult population is around 260 million, which means that 165.3 million adults in the US play games regularly.
These are the type of numbers that really like blow your mind. And I have a hard time like imagining the amount of people. But can you guys imagine, like, because this is a growing number, like we said, so can you imagine what this will be like 10 or 15 years?
Right?
It's crazy.
Right? Crazy. Okay, so then that's kind of segues into my last little statistic I have here, and that is about esports, which I know, George, you're much more familiar with. So in 2019, 300, or let's say just shy of 400 million people watched an esports event in 2019. And in spite of canceled events during the pandemic, that figure climbed to 436 million in 2020. Now, I don't have updated information on what 2021, 2022 look like, but I can only imagine the number of events that these eyes get. There was what was that crazy that came out? I completely forgot what it was, but oh my God, I'm going to sound so Canadian here, completely forgetting. It's the Super Bowl, right? That gets like the highest amount of views in the US.
Oh my God,
And
yeah.
yeah, sorry. I was like, what sport? It's the Super Bowl, right? And an esports event overtook it like multiple times in number of
You have to talk about the prizes, right? As well, Heidi. Like the prizes, the prize pool for these events. Like when I used to compete, and on a semi-professional level, I remember back in the day, the prize pools were like, $700, $800 when you get first place, and that was a big deal to us, right? Because it was, it was kind of like a minor thing. But nowadays, only a few years ago in Dota 2, I believe, I watched a 16-year-old go out there, play with his team, and make, I don't remember how much exactly, but a couple of $1 million by playing Dota 2 for like 2 hours on a world stage. That is crazy.
Like
that a
games.
16-year-old can do that.
They're willing to spend money on them. There's money in this industry too. It's really interesting. Also, I brought on Andy. Andy's from Stardust, who we're actually using to facilitate a lot of the blockchain development of our game. He has a ton of experience and really interesting perspectives on the space as well.
Yeah. Hey, Luke. Thanks for bringing me on. But also, I just want to keep right in the vein of the conversation. Happy to turn it over to other crypto stuff whenever. But the whole esports thing. Let's combine the last two topics. A lot of adults playing the game. I think that playing games in general in the U.S. and esports becoming larger. I think that let's just look at what it means to be an adult playing video games. I think it's not going to be so much catering to a demographic for games. I think it's just going to be a natural evolution of bringing of people of all ages getting acclimated to games. And as our country gets older, or this generation gets older, it's just going to be a matter of older people playing games that are fun, and games that are fun will be still fairly universal. And so talk about esports, like right now we're used to all these super young kids. Obviously the champions might have a slight advantage in reaction time, but experience and knowledge of the game and just like overall, game wisdom is going to be massive compared to, think of it like old basketball players, like old b-ball players at your YMCA, right? Some of those old guys who can't run, but they're like still incredibly good because they position themselves well and they know, who's good and what to do in what situation. But now in games, that massive advantage that young people get of being able to sprint and jump higher kind of falls away. And so I think the peak age for esports will also drastically be bumped up because the reaction times of the champions will always be like slightly, that cut advantage is huge. But, and George, feel free to jump in and give me your thoughts on this, but my thought is that like the peak age will be largely weighted by the reaction times, sure, but also just the wisdom of being able to play that game for like 10 years. And the peak age will not be like always 16, 18, 20. It'll be like 30 in some instances for some games because it's a lot of an intellectual battle. And I think we'll just
love that.
Adults.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
I love that perspective. And, this goes to prove that you could find success. Well, I would say that it does depend on the genre of the game.
For sure.
And, reaction time and, some of the FPS shooters have become very hardware dependent as well. So, you would want to have a great, rig, for example, if you want to play like a game like Valorant or CSGO on a professional level. But, at the same time, there are other games that are more strategic and like tactical where, nothing beats experience and wisdom. So it's just such a cool mixture, right? And just to reiterate my previous point, anyone can do it. Anyone can do it if they put in the time and effort. And obviously, when you're my age, I'm not that old, I'm 28, but I can already feel my reaction time slipping a little bit, but I can just, get on a different game and, I won't be at such a huge disadvantage there because I have the years, right? I have the experience. So really interesting point.
Yeah. I mean, as a 10, 11-year-old been playing Dota for that long, you brought up Dota, the international #1, esports purse. I know that I could probably play this game. I'm thinking now, like, if I was to sit down and regularly play it, like, well into my 40s and 50s, like, why not? Like, it's so much of it is strategy and just knowing what to do and when, keeping up with the meta. If you're doing those things, those are things that any person can do. You don't have to be super young and have that 1 millisecond split difference and to be able to get the advantage. It's so much of just where you are and when and why.
Agreed. Like I said, I love that perspective, and I'm sure like everyone can appreciate gameplay on a high level. It's so cool to watch mastery in whatever genre of game you might be watching. Even I can even imagine Pixels, and Pixels is, you know, by its definition, not a competitive / hardcore game, but I can't wait to see what creative stuff people come up, what the quote unquote meta will be in Pixels as well, right? You know, someone might find a really cool like farming trick, or, you know, make guides or something. And, you know, I can't wait to see all that creativity, you know, like just come out.
Oh, any game like that, there's always some weird, interesting meta that pops up, whether it's like speed runs or things like that. Stardew Valley, I wouldn't call it competitive, but there is this weird element of like competitive Stardew Valley that you'll find on YouTube if you really crawl, where people try to speed run to certain objectives or to like certain goals with really weird constraints, and try to make that happen. Like I saw a challenge where somebody beat the entire game without selling any items to a store. They were trying to do like an anti-capitalist run.
An anti-capitalist run. I love the
Yeah.
sound of that. But yeah, that's mastery, right? And it's so nice to watch. Whenever I discover videos like that, I just have to watch them from start to end, because it's always great to see someone putting in time and achieving a certain type of mastery, whether it is having, you know, superhero reflexes or just being a tactical genius. And that kind of moves on to the next point. And like, how do you want to play the game? There are many ways to enjoy the same game. And I think that's also a big part in why the gaming industry is so rapidly growing now, because we don't have to, like the four of us, we don't have to play the same game the same way. And I think that's a very important factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And also in that same like little fun piggyback onto that is I just like to, generally speaking, the four people can be gamers and not play even remote to the same game. When I ask them if they're a gamer, because I do this all the time, I'm talking to game devs like 24/7, and sometimes I'm talking to someone who's not a gamer or they don't think they're a gamer, and they say I'm not a gamer, and I'm like, do you play any games? And they say yes, and then the conversation naturally flows into me saying you are a gamer because you're playing games. And I just think that in that same vein, like playing one game different ways or people playing drastically different games are fun and they're meant to be fun. And like, you don't have to be an esports pro, be a gamer, or have a rig to be a gamer. You can be an iPhone gamer. I just, generally speaking, want to remove any kind of like colloquial, misrepresentation of what it means to be a gamer, because it's an open space and we're here to just have fun. And on that, not to totally keep on going, but on that, I just think that the internet in general, and then crypto obviously is a part of this, but the internet in general is closing the feedback loop on what it means for our culture to be our culture, like what culture is in many different aspects. Like the money flowing to arts right now, and that includes games. And I just think that, there's so much to be enjoyed, and we're finding out what it is people actually want to enjoy, and just pushing people into all these art forms is amazing. So I agree with you. I think we should all be happy in playing same games different ways and different games, and just in general.
I mean, that's circling back to what I said at the beginning. I am that person that you're talking about that doesn't necessarily identify as a gamer, but it's purely because of the stereotypical definition that we've created around it. And then Luke telling me I'm actually a super gamer because I'm on level like 3,000 and something of Candy Crush, And so it really is interesting. And I think we are moving towards making it more, there's less stigma around it.
100%.
So Heidi, now that you're a hardcore gamer, do you have any more crazy stats for us, or?
That wraps up everything I'd written, but it goes on forever. Like, honestly, I had to stop myself from writing more and more things down just because it's such an incredibly huge and booming and growing industry.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. You can just even look at our development process for Pixels. I mean, there are so many facets and so many aspects of the game that you have to like think through, and it's a complex thing. It's like, taking a very complex, like shooting a scene for a movie, but you have several scenes going on at the same time. Like it's difficult, but it's so rewarding at the same time.
Yeah,
Exactly.
understanding these demographics and like who actually are playing games too. That's super important for actually building a game. You need to know that there's a market out there for people who want to play the type of game that you are. But also, you need to think about like what other games are in the space. How can you actually like contribute something novel to the space too? And that's why we're building in the genre that we're building in. We see like a ton of gamers who are like really, really interested in the space, Web3 in particular, who are just being completely underserved by, number one, any Web3 games being put out there, but games in general too, they're still being underserved. I mean, just internally in the game industry, a lot of the people building games have a very specific type of game they want to build, and they lean towards that. But then there's this entire market of gamers out there that are just not being completely served as they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. I think we can probably wrap it up here. This has been really fun. I love talking about, something so related to what we're building, but also just like from a wider perspective. So yeah, thank you all three of you for coming up and chatting with us today. Next week, our space will definitely be more Pixels related, so stay tuned for that one. Do we still take audience questions? We absolutely do. We got Kid Penguin on our general chat. Feel free to ask a question.
Yeah. Also, in terms of Pixels updates too, I think we're potentially shipping up next week. We're ironing out these processes to promote all this new data and these new tools. We're shooting for a ship date next week to get some of the things we've been talking about out that are already developed. We just need to go and test them and get them out there that way. But yeah, I think we'll get an update out before the next space even. Don't hold me to that. Otherwise, that update is be coming with the next batch of changes that we have. There's a lot of stuff we're holding in development branches that we want to ship out. We're ironing out our QA processes to get these out. But once we get them out, it's super exciting, much more polished. And then we should have a couple of exciting things coming to you guys.
Yeah, I'm really excited for things we have upcoming, and even the Twitter spaces that we have upcoming. They're going to be pretty cool. And like I said, I've said this many times, but if you have any ideas of things that you want us to talk about, different conversations we can have, let me know. Okay, I've got the question here. So I'm a professional in the tabletop gaming industry. That means board games, party games, card games, Dungeons and Dragons, and things like it. How do you think the tabletop gaming industry is influencing Pixels? Ooh.
What a great question.
Yeah.
Like, for example, you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons in there as well. Our team, we have actually played Dungeons and Dragons a little bit in preparation for what we're planning for the game. It was a lot of fun, admittedly. Some of my favorite games, like as a narrative designer, for example, some of my favorite games are set in the Dungeons and Dragons universe, and I know that other games that I also love also have like tabletop versions of them. So you could say that it is both kind of directly and indirectly affecting portions of the game, because it's like ultimately a tabletop game kind of is a role-playing game as well. And a lot of my narrative inspiration, for example, could come from games that are either based on tabletop games or based on Dungeons and Dragons or inspired by it, at least.
Yeah, you got to give respect to that kind of game and the tabletop games in general. They're really the games that laid the foundations for every type of game that we play now, or at least in the RPG setting. We're definitely an RPG. So, yeah, you got to give the respect to that. That's like saying that like a programming language is so essential to, like C or assembly was so essential to like building out like modern web browsers and stuff like that. I always come up with technical examples, but yeah, Dungeons and Dragons is one of those like core building blocks to games as we know it today.
Yeah, and apparently someone just mentioned in the chat that there's some sort of new D&D for crypto that's being built right now. So
yeah, I do know that project actually. They might be a like sister company of ours, in another portfolio of us.
Oh, exciting. Awesome. Okay. Well, we will see you all next week. Thank you all for coming out. And, your question you had here is really cool. And if you have any other questions, please pop them in our general chat and we will get to them as soon as possible. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, y'all.